Margaret had been a part of the senior center for so long that she really had an ownership of the place and she saw the needs. And so, to my surprise, then she became a key person in getting some supplies needed that the senior center needed because she started talking to everybody about how awesome the senior center was and how people really need to support it and to help out with this certain project or whatever. So I was just thinking of how volunteers have a unique inside view of an organization and what's going on, but also of the clients of that organization and a better understanding that we're all people with needs. Does that make any sense at all what I'm trying to say? Okay. Anyway, that's my failure success story.
Love it. Love it.
I love both those stories. I mean, very inspirational. I mean, and this is why we engage in this activity. You know, from youth to the other end of the spectrum. And I've had an opportunity to work with both as well. Started out volunteering at a charter school here in the southern part of the county. But it blew me away because I had no knowledge of charter schools at all until I was approached to actually serve on a board for one of the first charter schools way back in the day. But I had a chance to meet students, parents, faculty, staff working on several charter schools in the LA area. And I heard parent after parent just testify about how their child had blossomed, when they came into that charter system, as opposed to feeling alienated or victimized, and not to put down public schools in general, but that was the experience of this particular population. And I heard the same thing when we started to interact with community here in Washington State. Uh, the parents that just swore by the effect that the charter system had on their child, and so I really got sucked into that space. But watching these young people, develop. I mean, granted, as a board member, you're somewhat removed from the day to day, but every now and then we'd have an opportunity to interact with these kids, and the poise, the confidence. Uh, it was just really uplifting to get exposed to that. And then at the other end of the spectrum, most of the folks I serve with on the Seattle King County Advisory Council on Aging and Disability Services, or gray hair like myself. Uh, but these people are sharp as a tack. I mean, just because you've got a few years on you doesn't mean that, well, like you alluded to earlier, Lisa, we form these impressions about the stereotypes. Okay, if you're elderly, you're probably in a wheelchair, just wasting your time. And this is not true. A lot of folks, because of opportunities to volunteer, maintain the sharpness, remain productive, their health benefits, their emotional state benefits. And so it's a win-win. And so I applaud everybody engaged in making those opportunities available to people to volunteer.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much. Again, my heart does sing with this. It's really an opportunity to extend humanity to each other. I've learned so much from, speaking to people from different people groups and cultures and faiths and beliefs, and it really broaden and my horizons and, answered and resolved some of my curiosities that I have. And so I really love that piece. One of the things that, I wanted, as I was listening to everybody's stories, I was thinking about one of the volunteers, a volunteer a mother-daughter team. And I used to work before I was at United Way. I worked at another organization and I would do tabling to recruit volunteers. And our executive director will see me. I have all of my little things to go out. And he's like, "All right, Alice, how many are you going to bring in? How many are you going to recruit?" And I'm going to say, "Well, it's just like marketing. It's 7 touches before, a behavior changes." And so I'm going to go there and I'm going to, talk about volunteerism. And maybe that will be the second time, or maybe it's going to be the sixth time. And when they talk to the volunteer table next to me, they're going to be the seventh time, and then they're going to get that volunteer. And so I don't know if that was a response you wanted, but I never gave the number of how many I'm going to bring in because we don't know. These are planting seeds when we do a lot of outreach and engagement, and we never know what our impact is going to be either. When we talk about our mission to somebody and they're listening to us, and then they go off to the next table or they go off to the next thing. And so I always feel like this is an opportunity to share. And I went to Bellevue College to do outreach and recruitment, and I saw this mother-daughter team. And the daughter is college age, and the mother, went back to get her degree now that the daughter is college age. And they're together, and they were talking about our organization and wanting to volunteer. And I said, "Yes, we'd love to have you." And I got this is before we really got into technology. So I got their little emails on paper and I emailed them. And every quarter, pretty much every quarter, I'd go to Bellevue College to do their tabling. And I saw them again, at the 3 months and then at the 6 months. And one day they called up and they said, "Hey, we want to volunteer." And I saw them when we did our interview because we also had an interview process. And I recognized them, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" They're like, "Sorry, we weren't able to do it, earlier, but we are able to do it now." And so we talked about where to place them, and I placed them in our reception area to welcome people. And I saw, our staff looked at them and they're like, sometimes you can just see how people have those biases and how they're going to. And they were like, and I'm like, "Hey, they're great." And so they moved on, and this team ended up being some of our best, volunteers and outreach. We created a brochure, and the mom was like, "Alice, I'd love to take some of these brochures and take it to my church and my community." And she just recruited because she was so sold, and had a relationship, understood the mission and connected with the mission. And we never, it goes back to we never know what somebody is going to do, and to Lisa's point, surprise us. And kind of to Joe's point, we never know with sometimes we think about seniors, and what Lisa also talked about. We think about our biases. And I have to say, I am not a tech savvy person, but one of our amazing volunteers who is retired, and he's always, pushing me to utilize technology. Um, I'll let them reveal themselves someday. And so we never know what, we have to expand upon our biases and what we hear and listen to, and open up our curiosity and open our mind. and our volunteers, and creating that culture too, so that your volunteers are meeting other people and talking to each other and engaging. And that's when we have that interconnectedness and that larger impact, that larger societal impact of what volunteerism and service to others and each other get. And I just wanted to end with one comment. I had talked to one of my really close friends, and I told him, when I volunteer, I don't feel like I'm serving, I feel like I'm getting more from my service than the people that I'm serving. And I, to this day, it's the same. Even though I'm pulling the weeds, it's still this peacefulness and calmness that I have. And I see the little bees flying around and the birds, and we get to see, the eagles. And there's so much to the societal impact that we actually cannot count all of the positive benefits that our volunteers do within our organization and what they do when they leave us and they're out in the community on the day-to-day life. And so when I did these workshops for volunteer engagement, I always utilize one quote for the measurement evaluation part of the section. And it was like, everything counts, can't be counted, and everything that can be isn't, necessarily what's important to count and to measure. And so there's so much to this. And, sometimes it's being advocates to your colleagues to let them know, that we might not see the benefits and the societal impact, and it's there. And so I kind of I just love what you all have shared, and I wanted to kind of pause there. Um, and thank you, Mark. And to again thank our panelists for sharing their experiences to this session today. This is just again the tip of the iceberg of what they have, and also you who are participating, your wisdom and your experiences on engaging volunteers and being a volunteer and so forth. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And then with that, I wanted to open it up to some Q&A. I know that we had a question in the chat. Maybe there's some other comments that Brandon, Lisa, and Joe, you'd like to kind of ending remarks before we kick into the Q&A. That would be great.
So Cindy had a question for Brandon, right?
Yes. So, before we go into that, I'm sorry, I'm always so excited I go ahead of myself. Any lasting comments from our panelists before we go to Q&A?
I just wanted to say that, my story with Margaret, it all worked out really well. But I also want to say, it's okay to fire a volunteer. Sometimes people are not a good match, and that's okay. But I also wanted to point out that probably the core to a successful volunteer program with happy volunteers is that there is a person that the volunteers can go to, that there's a liaison, someone that they can talk to. So I would say that the core things is that there's someone who's in charge of the volunteers, or someone that they can go to. And then secondly, that there is a process. So if you want a really successful volunteer program, don't just put out there, hey, we need volunteers. Well, people are like, well, to do what? For how long? When? And I see that too often out there is, yeah, we just need some volunteers. So put a process in place is what I wanted to say. And if you do that, then your volunteers are going to be your greatest advocates out in the community and raise awareness for your organization. They're going to do so much for you, you won't believe it. So it's a little outlay of time and maybe even finances to pay somebody to have some hours dedicated to volunteer management, but it will be so worth it. That's my last 2 cents.
Thank you, Lisa.
I,
And oh, go ahead, Joe.
yeah, I was just going to say I fully agree with that. I mean, I've seen organizations that are so desperate for volunteers. I mean, all comers, and nobody ever gets fired, and that can really, what do they say, one bad apple spoils the whole barrel, or whatever that saying is. So yeah, I fully endorse that observation.
Yeah, I would say, when we talk about the benefits of the organization of having volunteers internally, or we look at, well, how many paid staff would we need to hire to replace our volunteers? And I think it's like 5 full-time staff minimum to replace the capacity that our volunteers provide. But then you're also losing almost 130 different personalities and backgrounds and experiences and those adults that the youth get to connect to. So it's not even really a replacement at all. That's just talking about the time, but even the expense of that time, right? So we've had essentially half-time capacity dedicated to volunteer coordination. Well, you take that halftime and now you're multiplying that by 10 monetarily. It just it makes sense, for the organization to use volunteers. We can be more effective with fewer resources. But that doesn't mean it requires no resources, right? Like, we do have that halftime capacity built into a full-time position, and everybody at the organization engages with volunteers in different ways. It does require some investment to do it well, but it can be a really, really good return on that investment.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think one of the misconceptions of this is that when we engage volunteers, we are taking away from jobs and we're taking away from somebody's vitality. I see it a lot where people don't want to engage volunteers because they're afraid that they're going to be replaced by a volunteer. And I have to say, when you're doing it well, you are keeping your job and making more jobs, more paid jobs, because you really do need to have people who are there to do it. And that's not to say that all volunteer, organizations that are volunteer run are not able to engage with volunteers. That's not. I'm not saying that that is not true. Um, but one of the things is that if we were to really have our whole society, and for CEL, we envision a world that thrives together. And in order to achieve that, we really need, all hands on deck. And when we're able to engage volunteers, help plant trees, to help tutor young people, to help, shuttle seniors to their appointments, that interconnectedness is what's going to make us strong. That interconnectedness is going to help us envision a world that thrives together. And we will be happy. Not just the volunteers are happy, but our whole society and the folks who are working at organizations in the community will be healthier and happier, in the long run. At least that is what I'm envisioning for us. And all the money in the world would not be able to help us finance all of that. And we can utilize those dollars to, you know, be put into other areas and engage, the whole community into this work. Not everybody is going to want to work, and serve the environment, but each person has a love. And if we're able to, as Lisa said earlier, help people find their dream and their passion and their purpose, we can really resolve a lot of the things that we have. We will have enough hands on deck to do that. And so I really appreciate all of your thoughts on that, and then the folks who are on here, and the people, listening in the future, how volunteerism and civic engagement is such a strategy that is so important for our society, so as a whole, to thrive together. And so, all right, I said that you all can ask your questions, so I'm going to go ahead and switch it to that part.
Should I hop into Cindy's question? Or, oh, Cindy, I see you put your hand up too.
Oh, I had a follow-up question, but go ahead first.
Sure. So, when I mentioned we have over 130 volunteers engaged with youth in our programs, that's just the long-term volunteers who've gone through our application and training program and our facilitating programs. We also have volunteers doing things behind the scenes where they're not working with youth or volunteering in short-term roles where the youth engagement is maybe a little bit less significant and where there's supervision, where they're never going to be alone with youth. And they're usually folks that we know and that we trust, like the partner of a volunteer or, or a family member, something like that. So we engage a lot of other volunteers in short-term roles as well. One of the challenges I have found is that um, it can actually be more difficult to do that in some ways. So if somebody say they work in marketing and they want to volunteer to help Lambert House with marketing, that is absolutely something that we need help with. We don't have a marketing staff person. We don't have anyone on staff with those skills. We don't have the resources to really hire someone. Um, you know, I will try to engage folks to help us with marketing, but in my experience, they don't stick around for very long. They get a new job, they move, they're not engaging with youth, so maybe they're not as fulfilled as they thought they would be. And so I may work with somebody for 2 to 3 months, and they're putting in a couple of hours a week. And so that whole 2 to 3 months may be planning for something. And then when we're getting ready to launch, they ghost. They're gone and I don't hear from them again, right? Um, and same thing when I engage folks in volunteering around IT, technical support, computer troubleshooting, things like that. They may be with us for a couple of months and then they move on. Um, and so then I end up investing paid time into working with that person who doesn't really follow through with much as far as a deliverable for the organization. And so that can be really difficult, actually. Um, I think that our application vetting and training program is quite rigorous and our expectations are quite high. But I think that that's appropriate for what those volunteers are doing, right? Engaging directly with youth, building significant relationships. When we ask alums of our youth programs, what made the biggest difference for you at Lambert House? What do you remember about Lambert House? What impacted you during your experience 10, 20, 30 years ago? They usually will say the adults. They will name a specific adult. They'll tell you the day that that adult was in our drop-in center, and they'll recount an important conversation they had with that adult that made a difference in their life. Um, that's a really high level of responsibility to have as an adult looking out for young people. So, I do think that our process and our expectations are appropriate. And the result of that is that volunteers feel supported and feel prepared and feel like they're making a significant difference. And they're getting a lot out of the experience, which then helps them to stick around long term, well beyond that year that we asked for. Um, so I would say having a rigorous process, having high expectations can result in the organization getting more from its volunteer program. But I would say the process and the expectations need to be appropriate to the role. Like if you are organizing a park cleanup event, you don't need a process like ours. A park cleanup event can be something that somebody shows up to one time and helps out, right? Now, if you want a team leader to work with a team of volunteers and you want that team leader to be a volunteer and you want them to lead multiple teams over multiple events for a period of time, that team leader, you probably do want a more, maybe not even as rigorous as ours, but you want a process and you want some expectations and you want them to feel supported and like they're prepared to do what you're asking them to do. And so, I think as Lisa has also said, developing that process will result in longevity and result in being able to get more out of volunteers as far as fulfilling your mission. But it should be appropriate to what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
But
feel like that answers
yeah,
that
could I ask
question.
one other question? I totally agree. And if you're having like a park cleanup, or in my case, I work with the school, if we're having a Saturday work day, lots of people show up, they don't even need to register. But I also have worked with children, so they have to do a background check and there is some training required. And I believe they'll be committed, but lately I'm so discouraged because I will be counting on them to be there. I have to have at least 6 volunteers to make the program work, and they call me at the last minute. They can't come. They just don't show up. And I get frustrated when you really count on people because it,
Mhm.
it changes the teacher's whole day, causes a major problem when they're not there. And I don't know how to stress the commitment required while still valuing the fact that they're offering their time, they're not being paid. So I can't, I mean, I have politely fired people or moved them into another position if they're too undependable. But at the same point, I need the people. And I'm just really frustrated. That was why I came today, is my frustration with how to motivate the commitment required.
Oh, go ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead, Alice.
Um, I actually worked at a organization. You're working with children,
Yes.
Cindy. So I worked at the organization with the pine cones, and that was a before and after school program. And I was their first, volunteer staff person. And I looked at the situation and it was the same thing. They would come, they wouldn't come. And then, you need to have a certain amount of people for these programs. And so what I started to do was in the interview process, I stressed to them the importance of consistency for young people. And this is science, this is research backed, right? Especially for the schools. And so letting the volunteer know that, this is the opportunity. These are the things that, you'll be doing, setting the expectations. We worked with middle schoolers.
That's what I
That
do
had,
too.
yeah, so middle schoolers, I just let them know, hey, middle schoolers, they are in their at a time where they will have good days and bad days, just like us. But their good days and bad days could look like them spitting at you, because we literally had kids spitting on our volunteers. They would be mad at them. They will, throw balls. My office was right next to the big room, so they would throw balls and they would be bouncing off the walls. And that's part of their development, as
Mhm.
part of their development process. And they also need to earn your trust. And so by committing to come at your shift every single session, especially they will be ignoring you in the beginning. I let them
Mhm.
know they're going to ignore you. They're going to think that you're invisible. They're going to growl at you. You're lucky if they growl at you because that means they're engaging with you. Um, and I started doing that with all of our volunteers who want to work with these young people. And I kid you not, two older ladies, retired ladies, they globbed onto each other and I gave them the whole spiel. And after I left, they were still there. I'd see them at church and they're like, "Hey, we're still there. We're engaging." And they've been able to do like other activities with them like quilting and so forth. And it's because they stuck to it. They were you well, in a way I set their expectations so low. But I told them the truth, right, of the situation and what to expect. So they had the expectations of what this is. They decided, you know what, we're going to do that. We're going to show up each week on this day for these hours, for these kids, build their trust in us, know that we are not going to go away. Because that is the biggest thing with these young people, is that some of them that are having more challenges, which were the kids that we had, they were used to young adults leaving all the time. And so they had to rebuild that trust. And when you are able to share that with those volunteers, that that commitment stayed and then they make it. And then if they're not able to do that, they could say, you know what, I'm not able to make that commitment right now. And I think that being able to share the good, the bad, and the ugly allows for the individual to decide, is this the right position for me?
Thank you. That's good advice.
Yeah. Sorry, Brandon. Go ahead.
It's so funny. We do something very similar. In the volunteer interview, I talk about consistency for the youth, that it takes time for youth to warm up to new adults and for those relationships to form. And then once those connections and relationships are formed, we want the youth to benefit from them for a little while. And that's really the big reason for the 1 year commitment. But I also talk about the importance of volunteers to making the programs possible. That without them showing up and being reliable, the drop-in center can't be open. The trans support group can't happen. The art group can't happen. Um, and I'm always real with them. I say, when you are sick, we want you to stay home. And that was true before COVID. We want you to go on vacation and enjoy your life. And emergencies will happen. And I don't expect volunteering to come before your paid work. If they're, somebody who's not retired or they're not in school, I don't expect it to come before your classes. But then I say, we do need you to make this something of a priority, right? This should be a higher priority than that last second concert ticket you hadn't planned for. Now, you want to go to a concert that's on your volunteer night, we can plan for that. You can find coverage for your shift. We have tools to make that happen, but maybe not at the last minute, right? Um, and I also will tell folks, when I see volunteers miss more than 5 shifts a year, say out of an average of 48 shifts, I'll start to hear things from youth about how that adult that they've connected to and they look forward to seeing, maybe they feel like that adult is not reliable. I sort of paint the picture of the impact for them so they really understand you showing up is important for the youth and you showing up is important for the program. Um, And on the other end of it, we also have some of that frustration that um, sometimes volunteers aren't as reliable as we'd like them to be. And, just like you were talking about, Cindy, they're giving of their time, we're not paying them, the accountability and expectations are different. And we have to remain flexible because of that. And so there are times when I adjust my day a bit to be more present in the program if we have one too many volunteers that called out. And my colleague Lori likes to overstaff with volunteers a little bit, and she'll make sure that she has backups, folks that can step in if somebody calls out. She oversees and coordinates our 10 to 14-year-old group, which has a dedicated team of volunteers, and she really needs 4 adults for that group. And so having folks that she can call on to sub, who are a good fit for that group, um, is just something that she has to manage for. So some of that is also just the reality. You can paint the picture of the level of responsibility and commitment that you need and the importance of the volunteer role. And I think you'll get a lot when you do that. There is also just a little bit of a reality that you don't have the same leverage as you do with a paid employee. And even when you have paid employees, they get sick, they have emergencies. Um, we have a team of 4 staff. When I get sick, the executive director has to cover some of my work, and that's really difficult. He's got a lot of other work he needs to do, but that's also just a reality. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. And Lynn?
Yeah, thank you for all these wonderful discussions and for Brendan and Lisa and everyone for sharing your experiences. I happen to be someone who have worked with volunteers a lot too, and I have been working with different kind of organizations throughout the last 20, 30 years already too. So I do feel like volunteers are no different than a paid staff as far as, giving them expectations and all of that is concerned, which was touched on already. So I don't want to say too much about that. The only thing is that I do think there is a difference, which is volunteers are volunteers. They are doing this for free. So even though we can set some expectations for them, we as the manager or staff, we just really also really need to realize that that they need to have some of that flexibilities there in our expectation that they may not be able to fulfill sometimes because of other obligations. And I truly feel for volunteers too, because I used to volunteer as board members and all of that. We do a lot of works, but we are not paid. So, sometimes when you put yourself in those shoes, let me put it that way, I think then we'll feel a little bit better to just kind of try to work with them the best we can, but also helping them to know how important their contribution is to the organization or to the activities that's happening, and then how much we really appreciate them. I just really feel that's very important for us to stress when we are talking about working with volunteers. But of course, all of us probably have our reasons to do this, and some of us are very committed to do the work that we are doing. So we love to see everybody will be like us. But even we may have time that we wanted to take a break, right? So I think that is just something that I think that if we can kind of keep that in mind, that would be really helpful for everybody who is working with a volunteer, which is greatly appreciated. So anyway, I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. And Rebecca?
Hi, thank you. A really great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. My question is, with the current regime and the ever-changing political landscape that is impacting everyone on some level, what are organizations doing to keep volunteers engaged and are educated or informed about, I don't know, like any strategies or I guess anything that's intended to keep clients, volunteers, staff safer? I hope that question makes sense. But I'm wondering what what those conversations are looking like, and what the responses from volunteers.
I've got a little bit I can offer here. One of the advisory board that I volunteer on recently gave a presentation to our meeting from staff attorney in terms of, what precautions, limitations apply to them if an organization like ICE wanted to come into a private space. I mean, there are rules that govern what you can do in a public space versus private. And so they brought in a very informational presentation about that. And we also get regular updates from the director of the division, who shares with us, their current view of anticipated impacts. I mean, there's a lot, as you point out, Rebecca, there's a lot that's in limbo right now. And so, reassuring their staff, number one, but also us as a volunteer cadre, that, we're keeping on, keeping on. I mean, until we know there's a direct impact, nothing changes. And so, offering that reassurance frequently, especially for the employee base, but keeping everyone informed, volunteers included, as to the current management assessment of potential impact from these various governmental activities.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joe. Um, Thank you for your questions. And I just want to thank everybody for coming. And I know some people have popped off, and we have your email. We'll send you a link of this video. We have a volunteer who will help us edit this. And so give us a little bit, but we'll at least send out an email so that you know that we're getting that to you. We have other workshops. We have one in May 29th, mental health and self-care with a experienced licensed mental health counselor. Full disclosure, he is actually mine. He's amazing. So definitely check that out. It is a time, and our volunteers also need those connections and as well in community. And so with that, again, huge thank you to Lisa, Joe, Brandon for volunteering your time to be in this panel, sharing your wisdom. Thais, thank you for helping managing the whole session. And thank you for coming for the participants who came. And we will have more of these. We'll follow up with an email to just get some thoughts that you would like, other topics you'd like to focus more on, process building, interview questions, things like that, so that we can provide these resources to the profession and also other people who want to volunteer and want to know how to navigate, in those spaces. So I know there's only a few of us. Can we get one little group picture? Lisa, are you able to do a quick picture? Let us get folks unpinned. Let's unpin everybody and um, oops. Um, are you able to? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Thais. See, I'm not technological savvy, so. Everybody okay with it being in a picture? I know there's some folks have already left. Okay, all right. Thais, are you going to take it? Okay.
All right. Done. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Take care, everybody, and we will be in touch. And if you have any questions, you have our contact
Bye.
information.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.